works. And a screen share. This is the muscle you have to build. I was like, I'm remembering it. That didn't take too long off. Now, today we're going to do the working poor. We'll come back to that in a second. Back to business. We have, like I said, this midterm essay. And if you'll recall, this is a busy spring for me in terms of research and presenting in the world. And so I've designed a syllabus that has accommodated that accordingly. And so next week, we won't actually meet. I could have done something, a half-assed lecture from a hotel room with bad Wi-Fi has been done before. But it's also a very busy time of year, and I think that you guys probably can use that time otherwise. And so we will come back together the following week, which is the week before spring break, but we will meet on Zoom. I think that it will just allow for some flexibility, but it's going to be not a Zoom from San Diego's boardwalk while I'm careful of pedestrians watching me. It'll be in place. And honestly, I have a really bitchin' home workroom, I call it now, not an office. So I might join from there just because I love my backdrop so much. But this room will be more than available. And that is the case too next week. So even though we aren't meeting, if you just want a place to like come do some work or probably don't eat too much, don't spill if you do. But this room will be accessible all those times. And so as it looked to the future, we don't meet next week. We meet on Zoom the following week, and then we all get spring break, woohoo. But that actually means that today and next time will be our last time in person for a good couple of weeks. We will still have our Zoom and things like that, but it is going to feel a little different. And so I am excited that when we come back together on April 1st, aka April Fool's Day, I always like to do something special for the class at some point. And so it's a little on the horizon, but that is the day we'll all come back together. And ideally, if you submit your paper no later than Monday, you'll have your feedback by then as well. Are there any questions on the essay for the good of the group or about the calendar as described? Go ahead.
We're still meeting Thursday, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. We're meeting Thursday and yeah, I had an idea right before that question. It's gone that fast. Come back to me. Oh, well, if it's important, it will come back. Okay, no questions on the essay, no questions on this lecture, or excuse me, on the calendar. Obviously, though, I'm going to be making announcements to this effect, so this won't be your last chance to hear about it. But I do really want to use our time well that we have together. So we're going to today jump into lecture and let's see here. I love this. This is a good question. I'm going to read it to everyone and answer it. Is the grade we get on the midterm essay final, or are we allowed to make revisions based on your comments to improve our grade if needed? I love that question, especially I think the enthusiasm it reflects in a variety of ways. I will say, though, that the midterm grade is pretty final. The only time we've ever had anyone resubmit was in like you don't want to be asked to resubmit, let's just say. Because it's like, I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. You didn't mean to copy and paste this entire paragraph, right? I'm sure you didn't. So yeah, you don't want to resubmit your midterm. And if for some reason you do just wish you'd gotten a handful more points on it, don't forget all of the great many extra credit options we have that I would say if it's a 30-point essay, you could get all the way to like a 25 out of 30, and any one of the extra credit assignments would bring you up to full credit. So that is how you would earn those points back if that's a concern to you. Good question. And the comments, though, will be helpful for hopefully your next time around writing with us. What else? I think that's it. It was something. It'll come back if it is important, or you'll get an announcement that says, I remembered. Send, oh, yeah, I remembered. Office hours. I didn't get to do any last week as I'd hoped. I was in the wind, and so just virtual did not work out. But I have to confirm my schedule today, but I'm hoping to do some in-person office hours on an afternoon this week. I usually, they are always Thursdays after class here in person. But on big weeks, I like to add like an extra session. And so I do it in my office, but there'll also be a simultaneous Zoom link running. So whether you can pop in virtually or in person, you have those options to you. And, you can come in just to say, hey, talk about anything that you have questions on. But this is primarily too for anyone who has an outline or still chewing on a couple things. We can work that out together. And I think I've answered all emails from students unless you have a pending extra credit submission. I usually do those in batch form, so I haven't processed all the ones I have, but you should hear from me shortly on that because I'm kind of clearing the books before travel. But if you've asked about your essay or office hours, like a request to meet, and you haven't heard back from me, send me a reminder because I did try and clear those today before class. Awesome. Well, then we're going to jump into it. Now, today's content, what we left off with last week, and when in some ways, I could just, I guess, do what I want. You guys have to listen. That's not really my vibe. But I also, it's like, well, what's the method to the madness? And so I've told you before, this is a topic that's deeply meaningful to me. It's probably most accurately described as what I've been trained in as a sociologist. And the way I learned about it was, again, with this focus on structure and culture together, trying to articulate both in combination and interactions therein, but then these different slices, these different layers that we know, whether it's a structural or cultural or both, that is at play in this context. Now, up until now, right, we've looked at schools and their contributing factors, both as just a mechanism of kind of income inequality by design, but then also the mechanisms in the class, whether it's interactions among students, between teachers and students, cultural implications that also impact one's outcomes, either at the education, like in real time, or as we know, right, the snowball builds. And so if we think of when you're in grade school, we know that if you get behind, what do they say? If kids don't know how, you go from learning to read to reading to learn around fourth grade. That's when things start to shift. And so if you're not at that point yet, those kinds of deficits can start to accumulate. And if all else being equal, it just didn't leave the classroom, perhaps we could, I was like, we can't, literacy matters. We can't leave that alone. But literacy matters not only for the ability to read inherently and meaning accordingly, but think of what happens in the classroom as following you forever in the workforce in a lot of ways, in both positive and negative ways. And so if schools are both impactful in a real-time way, but then also because we know we go into the workforce someday and our credentials, our human capital is a reflection, right, of our educational experiences. We spent last week going from the school and its impact into the actual minds of the men who are coming up in these situations and trying to make sense of some really bleak opportunities available to them that has nothing to do with any choices they personally made, but rather is an accumulation of a historical legacy that by virtue of their race, they have been born into. Now, as much as the individual is an important actor and an autonomous unit in this discussion, very few of us, particularly those living in poverty, have the ability to like completely make their own decisions or even live alone. In fact, one of the forms of wealth, if we think of wealth in not just economic terms, I read recently that a form of wealth is being able to live by yourself in your 20s or your 30s, especially for millennials. I don't want to be like, we got fucked over. So, going back to live at home is actually a much more common experience than it was a generation or two ago. But then we can also think of even beyond that phenomenon. We know that families have doubled up or lived in multi-generational homes for forever, and that this isn't necessarily always a negative thing by any means. In fact, a multi-generational home can be a huge resource and protective, and be a point of resilience, be above and beyond anything else. But when we also think of living in poverty and how if you're living together by choice, that's very different than living together because we need 10 people in a house to pay rent and pay utilities. And that we live in a housing market where even if we wanted to live in our own place, none of us could afford it. Or we're all still living where we grew up because there's nowhere else to live. We have no way to make our own way in the world. And so in the canon of sociology, we can think of obviously the choices of individuals being hugely important, but in urban inequality, there's also always been a real focus on households and family experiences, and how we know that it's not just single people trying to meet their own needs, but rather families, often single mother-headed households who are living in poverty and are having to quote unquote make ends meet. And so we are a little over 30 years out from a book called Making Ends Meet, how oh God, what is it? The working poor. I don't remember the rest of the quote. Okay. How single mothers survive welfare and low wage work. Boom. Because when we think of the demonization of those who live in poverty, those who get the bulk of it are anyone associated with any kind of public benefit receipt, whether that's, a lot of people don't realize that things like Medicaid, having insurance through the government, that is a form of social safety network, right? It's just like food stamps and welfare. SNAP, TANF are the current words for food stamps and welfare. And these things have been named and changed over time because of the programs that were in charge of them changing, but then also too, trying to respond to the constant cultural bias against really any form of government handout in America. That is just a cultural block that we have traditionally held. There's lots of reasons for it, but I don't want to go into the Protestant ethic today. But we know that if we think of the people receiving things like welfare as particularly stigmatized, it is only somewhat better, but it is actually, by some accounts, better morally for some who feel that working is better, even if they still are in that, like they're struggling to make ends meet. And actually in the 90s, there were huge changes that made it so if you were on welfare, you had to go to work no matter what. And so families, particularly female-headed households, were stuck in this loop of just churning between low-income work and welfare. And they had to be really creative to make ends meet because on paper, there was never enough to cover the needs of their household on any given month. And so Kathy Edin, much like Bill, William Julius Wilson, Kathy Edin was one of my other advisors at Harvard, and she has gone on to really dig deeper into this as both a global phenomenon. So that's what we'll touch on next time, using the metric that's been globally defined as poverty or extreme poverty, being $2 or less a day. But before we get into that, I kind of just want to speak to what does it look like when we move up from the individual to that level of the household? How are resources at the family level impacting the discussion we've been having all semester? Unfortunately, we're still in a spot with our audio, so I'm going to cue this up.
A real
You
mess.
guys can see it, but you're gonna have to, oh, we have to listen. We have to stop the screen share. For copyright purposes.
And the people now, mayor in New York, why is it I can't shake the feeling that you're gaming the system? Vigilantes are not heroes. They are a threat to society. This city is yours, and you're not going to let some mass criminal take it away from you. I will be there. Oh, again, on Disney Plus.
Skip, hold on. Where is it? I was like, I'm looking for it and it's like, it's on the right. Did they move it? Okay, yeah, I was like, the screen looks weird. Hold on. There it is. Yeah, that was weird. It was like hiding in the black on the side. That, God, I swear I'm blushing. I know how to find the skip button. Oh, there we go. Okay.
I stumbled one day on a government report in the library. And the government report showed figures representing the income and expenditures of American households.
Hold on, I think it turned the screen share off. Oh God, the Zoom's still on, right? Oh my God. No, I can hear it. Okay. You know, I really miss my little speaker. That's what I'm gonna say. Hold on, guys. Technical malfunctions. Zoom, where are you? There we go. Screen share. Okay. And we have, that's what I did. I stopped. So, before I jump into the readings, has anyone ever heard of the EITC? Earned Income Tax Credit? Okay. I'll see a couple hands. Let me check with Zoom. Okay. Let's say, even if you haven't heard of it, did you ever experience tax time with your family as a good time? Like you guys got money from the government. It was like Christmas. Even if you didn't have one, you got to have Christmas kind of, usually February, maybe taxes were good. I live now, taxes are not good. I owe social mobility. But if you have ever wondered why, especially because I think most people in America, you know, there's a tax time. God damn, I'm now one of the millions. Because growing up, tax time was, like I said, it was actual Christmas where Christmas was light, but February, the W-2s, it was like a whole thing. That is because of the earned income tax credit, as well as different credits associated with dependents. Now, what is quite unique about the earned income tax credit is that it is one of the few examples where we actually can show a positive impact of such a direct intervention, which it's like they said, it's 2,000, but then depending on dependents too, you can get, you know, some families might get up to 8 to 10 grand. And it is you know, you don't want to fall into, oh, if we just gave everyone money, all these problems would go away. It is so far from that simple. But the success of the earned income tax credit cannot be understated because it has time and again been shown to be a directly beneficial thing in the lives of those receiving it, not just because they get that direct influx at that moment, but if we think of all the expenses and household things that every month we know that we have to pay certain bills, but then there's also unexpected things, doctor costs, car costs, things that maybe you only have to pay once a year. Very rarely does a family that's living at or below the poverty line have, they don't have enough income to meet their monthly needs, let alone to address any needs outside of that budget, right? And the earned income tax credit can actually be leveraged for a great variety of things. They went on to study what do people actually use it for, but no matter what, it has been shown to be hugely helpful. But then also because it is tied to paying taxes, because you're working, it has also been hugely popular. It's supported by both sides of the aisle, and it is largely seen as a way to incentivize work, get people off of welfare. And that is in many ways kind of going back to that core American idea that there is a difference between those who work and those who do not, and that there is a moral level imputed to one's employment status. So if you do not work, you are by some metrics seen as less, particularly in an American context. And so the earned income tax credit is kind of a bit of a unicorn in the fact that it actually works and it's been widely supported, but it is also something that she was kind of filming this, I think, at a time where a lot of programs were kind of under attack. And so I can't say maybe in the current climate, it's as universally looked on, but I would say historically speaking, the earned income tax credit is one of the really clear things that it's like, look, we thought this might work and we did it, and it actually went on to do even more than we thought it would. That is a very rare sentence to say in income related policy, et cetera, poverty related policy. Now, before we get to the earned income tax credit, I want to just talk about who was it that would even be in this demographic to like need help, and why, what are the things she was talking about? Because she was giving you the benefit of 30 years of making ends meet. Early on though, like she said, although there were certain numbers on paper and people were like, well, obviously they're doing it somehow because they're not homeless and they're making ends meet. We know that. No one had ever actually asked them, how do you provide for yourself and your dependents when we know every month you operate at a deficit? How do you actually do that? Now, they find that this is an important question to ask because that experience is not something universally shared. That because we know household resources are hugely impacted by the head of household's income. That's almost directly what it is based on. The frequency of single mothers and single parent homes, that by nature, by definition, means that there's only one income in a home, right? And they found that 55% of all African American children were living in a mother-only family in 1990, as were 41% of white children. 22% of all children were living in mother-only families in that year. So this is over time just a trend that we've seen more of. And if we had the same resources in these households as others, it wouldn't maybe be necessary for us to, moms can do it all. But as we've learned in previous weeks, the statistical likelihood that your household will be experiencing poverty, instability, a variety of other negative things is hugely correlated with a single parent household, largely a single mother household. And that this is, while it is a somewhat racialized experience, it is not something that is impacting a small percentage of students or of children. Instead, it's as many as 1 out of 5. And that is doubling, right, over time. In 20 years, they were seeing that number go up. I'm sure the number's only higher in more recent data. Now, among whites, the proportion of children living with 2 parents fell from 9 in 10 to roughly 7 in 10. But for African Americans, the proportion dropped from about 6 in 10 to just under 4 in every 10 children. So in some ways, while there was a on this, we see here, right, 55% versus 41%. While that is probably most likely still statistically different, it is not the, maybe 2, 3, 4 times likelihood that we're used to seeing. But the change over time is much greater. And you're also seeing, if we think of what we've learned in other weeks, that in some ways there's almost that kind of critical mass that in a great majority of social phenomena, it doesn't have to be everyone who's experiencing it for it to still impact everyone. That there is impact on resources socially, the ability to know that your neighborhood is safe for your children, for example, as one metric of community health. Obviously, if we know that all the homes are majority moms and we know they're all working moms too, it stands to reason there could be times where there's no moms at home on the entire block, and that might impact any one household in certain ways, but you can also see where that would impact the safety of the neighborhood, the ability, right, for the neighborhood to be collectively what was it, the oh God, collect solidarity, the ability to act as a unit. If everyone is a single parent, it's an opportunity cost. You can't be in two places at once. And if we see this clustering in certain communities over others, that's where, again, then we're even more concentrating the effects of whether or not everyone in that community does or does not have a dad or mom in the home will still impact everyone in that community. Now, to look at this deeper, for the first time ever, they actually, what's really notable about both Kathy and Laura's work is that they were mothers themselves at the time. And so they decided that not only did they want to speak and like interview people to understand how they were doing this, but they also wanted to be able to observe and to in some ways experience it by virtue of being in place. And so they went to live in the communities and raise their children alongside many of the women that they were interviewing in the studies. Now, they were living in the community, raising children. There were 4 cities in particular that they looked at. Camden, New Jersey comes to mind always. It is, yeah, Camden. They tried to select areas that had proximity to cities, but were largely low-income areas that were stratified based on race. So they could try and compare and contrast whether or not the mechanisms look different by virtue of place or race. Now, they were 2 women who would bring their children with them to the playground. They would recruit there in real time as a way to, I think you can imagine what's unfortunate is any kind of interview work, there's always the question that can be made or critique of like, well, how do you know what people say is true? How do you know? I mean, we could say anything we want, right? That was the point of living there in that place, to provide that ethnographic component as a way to use participant observation, actually participating in that community to verify that what they were finding in the interviews was lining up with the things they were actually observing in real time. Now, I sometimes don't always go into the methods as deeply, but if you'll recall, you might someday down the road have a chance to propose a project as one of your options for a final. I don't know. So you can kind of keep little notes on methods if it seems compelling. But I always say that what the question you're asking determines the methods you use. And so like they said, like Kathy said in the video, they knew the numbers of the situation. People understood how many people were poor in that area, how many people were on welfare, how many people were working, et cetera. But they did not know how people were doing things. And so how and why questions often lend themselves to interviews or qualitative methodologies, broadly speaking. And this is, in their mind, trying to compare and contrast the effects of welfare benefit levels, labor market conditions, and living costs on economic situations and survival strategies, because they knew going in that these families never had enough, but somehow were still able to quote unquote make ends meet. Now, single mothers were recruited who were either 1, on welfare, or 2, worked low-wage jobs. In some cases, these women could meet both categories because they followed them over time, but they interviewed each woman multiple times and actually wound up interviewing this near 400 people for about 4 hours per person, which resulted in 1,500 hours of audio. And if the book was published in 97, I can say they were probably doing a bulk of the research right around when I came into the world. And so this was, pre anything but a fucking calculator, really. I think that I was like, no offense to the computers when I was born, but they were basically typewriters with a cool screen. And that's obviously a relative term because it had a screen was why it was cool. Now, this doesn't even include the countless exposure hours they accrued living in the community. And I always like to shout out this methodology in particular because it's actually how I do my work, but it's also, I think, not that we should be moving in a way that's anticipating people not believing our research. But we also can think of like, well, I want to make sure that what I show, I stand behind. So I'm going to personally come at my data from every direction and triangulate it, as they say, to make sure what it is that I'm finding in my interviews lines up with what people are doing. Because you're right. Like if I am an empirical mind, I'm going to call bullshit on myself if I am hearing one thing in my interviews and then I'm living in the community and seeing something totally different. Now, in our line of work, we count things now through exposure hours. They weren't recording at all times, though. I want to make that point known, that in a lot of ways, they were off the clock when they were with the women in that kind of living space. But no matter what, that means that what they found probably holds water, right? And as she shared in the video that if we knew that families did not have this on a monthly basis, but were still able in some way to meet their needs, how were they doing so? It was primarily through three basic strategies in the formal, informal, and underground economy. Cash assistance from, so that was working in the formal and informal and underground economy. Cash assistance from absent fathers, boyfriends, relatives, and friends. Cash assistance or help from agencies, community groups, or charities in paying overdue bills. Now, the real problem with the federal welfare system is primarily a labor market problem, that it's a lack of access to a living wage and not a pervasive or disabling poverty culture that made working so difficult. Now, I think right now, maybe in the context of this class and just like being 30 years in the future, I don't think that this is such a controversial statement. Like that probably lines up with your experience. Because as she said in the video, things have actually only gotten worse since they were collecting this data. But you should actually realize how at the time, how revolutionary this was as a statement. In some ways, as mothers themselves, as working mothers, they had a desire to communicate how the women that they were seeing on the news being stigmatized and denigrated as people living off the system, who don't value hard work, who are negative contributing members of society, or non-contributing members of society. That was, and in some narratives continues to be the way anyone who receives public aid is portrayed. But particularly in the context of welfare reform in the 90s, this was a deeply needed portrayal because it was then able to open up for more possibilities when it came to interventions. If they were just thinking, this is where the structure and the culture come in, is again, if you are thinking about people not working as a problem of people not valuing work, they don't like working, they're just no good, because I think good means working. Like if that's what you think the problem is, the solutions that you propose are going to be hugely dictated by what you think is possible. But if you can appreciate that, actually know that many of the people who are on public aid are just as begrudging accepting it as they are of someone, of anyone else. They don't think it's okay either, but they have needs that must be met. And in the absence of formal employment, they're going to use what is available otherwise. And that if we were able to facilitate employment in other ways, we would see the public aid recipients nearly vanish, because if they could work for a living in a good way, almost everyone would. And I only say almost everyone because it's people, we can never say absolutes. But in a policy climate that was so negative towards welfare recipients, they, as mothers themselves, really kind of took the time to bring to bear the experiences of women who had stuff in common with them as mothers, but actually could not have been more different in certain ways. Kathy and Laura were both PhD holders at the time of their research, right? They were mothers, they were working mothers, but they were probably salaried and had all, had husbands. There was all a whole thing. And so using that position to bring light to this situation, I thought was, I've always thought it's pretty cool. Kathy, I model my work after hers, because they also did it in a way that had teeth. Like, it wasn't just trying to play on people's heartstrings. It's like, no, we lived in that community for 4 or 5 years. We know that what we saw is true, and that it is government and it is the employment opportunities or lack thereof that really is why people aren't working. It's not because they don't value work and that they wouldn't rather be working to support their families. So ultimately, unless states can manage to equip welfare reliant single mothers with the skills that lead to living wage jobs, single mothers who work will continue to need government help. Now, is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't think so. As I said, I personally, up until a few years ago, was eligible for many public aid programs, and it is actually a very uniquely American bias against that as a form of social intervention. But what I want to do now is actually give you guys a chance to bring these things together. So we have really small groups today. So I'm thinking this is going to be kind of like a partner adjacent activity. And I'm going to write it on the board because we're at like an interesting point in the semester where we're getting ready to pivot and have just a few, we're week 8. We got about half that many more. And so together, you're gonna talk about your own experiences, particularly with this week. I think in some ways it might be hard to shout it out in a big classroom, but I want you to talk about how this resonates, whether it is as someone who may have experienced these programs in your home life, or just like I said, even if it's not you in your home life, like if you lived in a community, if anyone ever here was on free or reduced price lunch, you've been part of these programs. But as someone, or maybe someone who wants to learn more about that experience, whatever you fit in, I'm really interested in where you guys have questions still. So when we come back together, your partner, duad, dyad, or if it's a triad, that's okay too. You're going to have one question. That's it. You can have more than that, but you have to be responsible for reporting out one question that you still have. So it's 1:02 right now. I'm gonna give you guys about 5 minutes to do this activity, and then we're gonna report out rapid fire around the room. If you're on Zoom, give me a second to tailor this to you. So yeah, just hang tight. Cool beans. Let's play a song while we do this. You guys can start partnering up. I'm not gonna partner you up, just sit by whoever's next to you. That is hopefully who you'll do this activity with. And I'm gonna write it on the board. Like I said, where does your personal experience fit with all this? Whether it's public aid, earned income tax credits, etc. Obviously too, last week, we learned a lot about the mind in this, but we have 8 weeks left, and I want one question from you left before we say bye. I'll hopefully get to answer it at least. You'll say bye today, but I'll answer it before we say goodbye this semester. So yes, Zoom, hang tight. Music, that's what I'm doing first. What is the track radio? Okay. Zoom land, because I don't wanna lose time here. This is, we got 24 people. It'll take more time to let you go and come back. So, honestly, I'd love to see some questions from you guys. There are 24 of you. I'm gonna challenge you. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 groups in the classroom. My challenge to Zoom, should you choose to accept your mission, is that I'd like to come back to this and see. I'm gonna put you guys all in one big breakout room, and when you come back, I want there to be 10 questions from Zoom in the chat. I was like, you guys can talk amongst yourselves, but I can't turn off the main Zoom any other way. So I'm gonna put you all in one big room, not individual ones. I'm hoping it'll be some talking. But when we come back together, I want to see 10 questions from you guys about what do you still wonder about. This helps me, and it's gonna make you guys look awesome if you can beat the room. If you can get to 10, I'm gonna say you did it. Okay, so I'm gonna release you and you'll come back together in just a couple minutes with the main room. And I'll put the question in the chat before I do that. Yeah, you absolutely can. Yeah, yeah, there's no bad questions. And those are usually better questions if they're personally connected. Question. Okay. Alrighty, last minute. And I wrote numbers on the board, so hopefully you see where your number is and you have a question ready. This is the front. All right, bring in Zoom land back. Okay. Okay, Zoom, come back. Oop. Okay, everybody's coming back. All righty, guys, let's go ahead. All righty, so I'm gonna hope that you guys shared on things personally, but for the sake of, this is kind of a sticky topic, so I'm gonna let you guys chew on that amongst yourselves, but we're gonna rapid fire the question. I see, hopefully that you hopefully see, I've drawn the numbers on the board. So I'm gonna open it up. If you wanna go first, I have a number assigned to each group. This is group 9. What was your guys' question?
Will the United States ever reach a point where, like, public school will be, like, well-funded in terms of, like, also just, seeing higher quality meals just for students?
Ooh, I love that. Okay, excellent. High quality school lunch. Yeah, okay. Awesome. Who wants to follow up group 9? Or we can start at the top, but popcorn it if not. Go ahead. Okay. Group 7.
Why is Black people more stigmatized
Oh, okay.
as a worker than white entrepreneurs?
I'm gonna write both because it's both. Why? More stigmatized. I'm just gonna fill in the blank. That's kind of the point. I don't want to be like, you love my other class. We do a whole week on that, but I'm gonna work that in. Thank you, group 7. All right, group 8. Can I pick on you guys? Go ahead. Okay, I love it. Okay, so we've got 9, 7, 8, group 6 in the very back. Cushy, only because I know your name. You guys have a question you'd like to add to the board? We can also come back if not. Yes, of course. All right, I'm gonna toss it. Group 5 scampered, shocking. I'm gonna bring it to group 4 in the center, or we have group 3 across from them. If a question you guys would like to offer, be ready, groups 1 and 2. Go ahead. Ooh. Wait, so will it or has it? Or would it? Okay. Keep up with cost of living. Awesome, thank you. Groups 1, 2, or 3, anything we'd like to add? A question we still have. Go ahead, group 1. You look like you might have something.
Has the US changed how we perceive people who live off, I guess, government, like food stamps and other government?
Yes, public
programs,
aid
especially after
recipients.
COVID.
Oh, programs, post-COVID, I love that. Okay. Awesome. Groups 2 and 3, we are about to say goodbye. And Zoom, I was like, I don't know if it worked. Zoom looks like they got disconnected. We have no questions. Zoom, put some questions in for Zoom room. But question from 2, 3, and 6 to wrap us up. Anybody? We got 1 minute left. This is a chance to maybe put something on the syllabus, not added reading, but added lectures. Go ahead.
Like, why, like, worker, government assistants, like new people like us, if we get into detail, do we think it's recognized against people,
Mhm.
families, or, you know, not having a father in the home? Is
Yeah.
that-
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, they create broken families.
Oh, I can't remember what it's called right now, but yes, there is a whole line of inquiry about basically like how expensive it is to actually be poor and being fined almost for being poor, a poverty tax, if you will. I love it. We got some good questions on the board. I've got a couple from Zoom, it looks like. And we're gonna leave it here. I'll take pictures. And if you wanted to contribute to this, but you didn't want to do it like this, you can send it by email. Yeah, we'll see you guys on Thursday. Yeah, thank you. Yes. I love the questions on Zoom. You guys are almost, we got 1, 2, 3, 3 questions. You know what? That's almost the way. We almost got there. I'm gonna save it. It looks like everyone, it kind of had a problem with, I was like, there was a Zoom room. I hope it didn't give you guys too much hassle. If anyone has questions, I'm gonna clear the room, but feel free to hang around. Just gonna take a second to take a picture of the board. If you want to put a question to be included in this assignment, just go ahead and keep putting them in the Zoom. I get to save the chat. Awesome. We'll see you next time.